Hello, Trade Talks followers, and welcome to another episode right here at the Nasdaq market site of Trade Talks. I'm your host, Lyanne Alfaro. Joining me right here on set is Aquiles Larrea, CEO and founder of Larrea Wealth Management. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and so today we're talking about one of my favorite topics to talk about, Latinas emerging as a force in the U.S. job market. And you were just talking to me a little bit off camera about how the Latino force has been here in the U.S. for a very long time. But an interesting stat from the LA Times I'm going to quote, 61% of Latinas today are participating in the labor force, and that is set to grow. So talk to us a little bit about, from your expertise, the Latino, the workforce here in the U.S. economy and what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, the Latino workforce here in the United States has been steadily growing ever since I've been in the workforce back in the early 90s, and we're just seeing it growing by leaps and bounds. Here in New York, and I quoted this in my book, Gail R. Brewer, the Manhattan Borough president, made a quote that it was 86% a year ago that Latina businesses had grown, and it's just been an amazing ride. And I foresee that doubling and maybe tripling by 2025, 2030 or so. So that's just going to be a great rise and a great advantage for Latinas. And they're outworking a lot of their peers. So watch out.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. And you mentioned a great point, which is that in terms of new business production, Latinas are very much at the forefront. Talk to us about how we got here. Why is it that Latinas are jumping in at these rates into the entrepreneurship force?
Yeah, I think we don't have a choice at this point. Several people are disenfranchised. They're disappointed with the workforce. They don't want to have that corporate life per se. And so they started what seemed as side hustles, as you call it, to begin with. And now it's grown into legitimate businesses, and some have been absolute monsters. I mean, I see Latinas, Los Angeles, Texas, Miami, who are just killing it as far as the businesses that they have grown. And here in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut as well, we're just seeing a phenomenal growth. And I expect that trend to continue. You know, the trend is always your friend, and if you follow it of sorts, you're going to be amazed at not only what happens with the Latina and Latinos in the workplace, but Latinas are out hustling all their counterparts, and I think it's going to be an amazing ride.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely incredible. And now, like, if we look at even the stats in terms of Latino entrepreneurs overall, we've seen incredible growth in the last 20 years. From 2001 to 2015, we had somewhere from 6% to 15% of new entrepreneurs now accounted by Latinos. So that's pretty impressive in and of itself. But talk to us a little bit about the performance. How are these companies doing? We have heard another stat that a lot of them don't exceed the $1 million in revenue. What are some of the kind of dynamics we're seeing at play here?
Yeah, you know, you're seeing them. Actually, a lot of them are floating below the $500,000. They're making a decent living. They are outworking a lot of their peers. But in the case of Latinas, you know, what are the stats? They're earning 49 cents for every dollar their Anglo counterparts are making in the workforce. As entrepreneurs, they're looking to close that gap but it's not something that can be done overnight. But what we are seeing is that now people are looking for mentorship, guidance, and leadership from the Latinos who have come before them. And we're not seeing that big of a bench we talked about before, where we have a certain amount of people on the bench, but we need a heck of a lot more to say, hey, you know what, I need to give back. I need to show these emerging Latinas and Latinos, hey, this is how I did it. And it may not work for you, but it most certainly can be useful for you in terms of experience and getting yourself to the next level, getting over that $1 million hump.
So in terms of the bench, we're talking about not only mentorship and sponsorship, but also investment, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
that's
perfect.
very important. You know, a lot of people are not apt to invest in startup Latino things per se, but if they see, it's like at the end of the day, if you're an investor, and these are things that I know about, if I see a company or I see an opportunity I'm just like the sharks. I'm thinking I want to be on board with that, or I want to have at least a piece of it. So that could be a very interesting play as well.
Absolutely. And now in the years to come, we are seeing Latinos accounting for even more of the labor force. What are the kind of projections for us to see in the coming decade?
I mean, what did we talk about? 9.110% by 2028, I believe you said.
Yep.
I think that's an understated number. I think there's more Latinos in the workforce who are going to be dominating before that time. I mean, we're looking at just the population reaching, we're the largest minority by 2030, they say. But more importantly is that a significant number of Latinos are working to push that number up, even though they don't realize they're doing it, but they are absolutely pushing that number up. They are amazing at what they do, and their companies grow by leaps and bounds, and they don't use traditional financing. They use family financing, friends, and it kind of reminds me of when I started my own business back in 22, that there was no bank willing to lend to a lot of these type businesses where you just had to build it out from yourself.
And so Aquiles, you having been in this entrepreneurship and Latino space for quite some time before these reports have come about, what are some kind of the changes you've seen, in some of the biggest changes you've seen in the landscape, and what are you preparing for personally, being an owner of a business yourself?
What I have seen has been more that banks are starting to loosen the spigot a little bit. And I say a little, but once they start, they don't cut it off right away. It starts to flow. That trickle all of a sudden becomes a nice flow, and everybody benefits, not just Latinos. So small business in general start to benefit. Small to medium-sized banks are lending out more now than they had during the Great Recession, for obvious reasons, but now we're seeing it more trickle down to the small Latino businesses, the medium-sized Latino businesses, and they're not having to rely so much on friends and family for the next level funding. As a matter of fact, what's happening is that the banks all of a sudden recognize that these businesses are not only legitimate, but can make the banks a lot more money. So they say to themselves, okay, well, we see a profit center here, and we're going to work with these companies and what have you to go higher and go next level. And as you said, with the $1 million, maybe they're looking at $10 million. I have a buddy out in New Jersey. He has a $4 million a year company, and I could easily see him being in that $20, $30 million a year within the next 10 years. And I see that with a lot of businesses where I call them stealth ninja Latinos. They got the mask on.
Stealth mode, but they're about to
they're gonna explode on the scene, and everybody's gonna ask, "Where'd you come from?"
Well, it sounds like they've been there all along. Well,
sure have.
Aquiles, thank you so much for sharing some of your experience with us, as well as the stats and what to expect here in the labor workforce. We'll definitely keep an eye out on the stats and the new entrepreneurs entering the scene.
Thank you for having me. Honored.
Nasdaq followers, please stay tuned for more coverage coming to you right here from Trade Talks. Until then, we are signing off right here from the Nasdaq market site.